All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to our next session. I'm going to start with a question. Do you know that aside from negative work environment, harassment, bullying, and burnout too can result in impaired mental health among employees and cause a significant loss in productivity for employers? And to make things worse, creating a healthy workplace remains a big task, particularly in the current climate of COVID-19 pandemic. So today, we have our speaker of this session that has served in the Ministry of Health of Malaysia for 12 years. After the Asian tsunami of 2004, he took up an international assignment with the International Medical Corps. Subsequently, he went on to collaborate with other international development agencies, including World Health Organization, in the establishment of sustainable psychosocial rehab and community mental health services in various parts of Southeast Asia. He actively advocates for the mainstreaming of persons with chronic mental illness through the Malaysian Mental Health Association, of which he is the president. Today, our speaker is dialing in directly 7,200 kilometers away from Kuala Lumpur, which is in Nauru, a tiny island country in Micronesia, northeast of Australia. So without further ado, please welcome Dato Dr. Andrew Mohanraj.
Thank you to the STAR group for inviting me to participate in this online seminar entitled Work-Life Wellness in the 21st Century. My name is Dr. Andrew Mohanraj. I'm a psychiatrist and president of the Malaysian Mental Health Association, and I shall be presenting on mental and emotional disturbances among working adults. Now, we all, as working adults, spend a significant amount of time in the workplace. And therefore, a negative work environment can lead to psychological problems among employees and a significant loss in productivity for employers. And besides work schedule and workload, harassment and bullying too can result in impaired mental health. Therefore, creating a healthy workplace remains a challenge and in some cases a big task, particularly in the current climate of the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, what is workplace mental health and why is it important? Mental health is actually about how we think, feel, and behave. And we know that mental health problems are often a reaction to a difficult life event. For example, we may have had an experience of a recent separation or a break in a relationship, or had somebody close to us maybe had passed away recently. So these are all life events that can actually contribute to decompensation in our mental health. But we must also appreciate the fact that decompensation in our mental health or mental health problems can also be work-related. Work, we know, is good. Unfortunately, work can also aggravate pre-existing mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, and psychosis. Work-related stress, however, is very common. And therefore, we need to distinguish between stress and mental health problems, because we know that a little stress can actually motivate us to perform better. We all can, I'm sure, will remember in our students' days where with a little bit of stress we could do better in school, and we sometimes also could excel in our examinations because of that stress. But when such stress is prolonged or becomes very overwhelming, then it can lead to both physical and psychological damage. And therefore, it is important in the workplace to identify risks for psychological decompensation that are present in the working environment. The implications of workplace mental health problems may not be confined just to the workplace, but can actually have a negative impact on family as well as social interactions. In Malaysia, we do not have enough statistics or data to show how much our loss is as a result, or loss in productivity as a result of mental health issues in the workplace. But we have projected that by year 2030, in Malaysia, we would be losing about 23 billion US dollars annually as a result of mental health problems in the workplace. And therefore, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to invest in mental health in general and in workplace mental health in particular. Now, mental health problems in the workplace may not be that obvious either. The employees may indulge in substance or harmful use of substances or alcohol in the beginning in order to cope with the stress, which can later possibly develop into full-fledged anxiety or depression. Certainly, as managers, we know that we can monitor the performance of the employees, and we can detect if the performance is impaired. But there could also be significant absenteeism leading to loss of productivity. There could also be what is known as presentism, meaning spending a lot of time, long hours in the workplace, but not being productive. What is known as at work, but out of it. So, and this can also result in a great loss of productivity. And this goes undetected because the employees at the office putting in long hours in the workplace, but not being productive. Now, depression in the workplace can also, or is definitely a leading cause of disability worldwide. And in fact, depression is going to overtake cardiovascular disease as the #1 cause of disability among working adults worldwide. This disability is actually measured in terms of what is known as disability adjusted life years, which refers to the number of years lost from work as a result of health, of a particular health condition. Then we come on to harassment and bullying at workplace. Now, this has become very prevalent, or rather a lot of attention is being paid to these issues of harassment and bullying at workplace. And in fact, bullying and psychological harassment are commonly reported as causes of work-related stress by workers, and definitely present as a risk to the mental health of workers. In fact, can have a substantial adverse impact on the mental health of employees as a result of harassment, as a result of being harassed and bullied in the workplace. Consequently, harassment and bullying can have a cost for employers in terms of reduced productivity, again, and due to decreased morale and increased staff turnover. And in fact, the employee could also be deeply traumatized as a result of such harassment. And this harassment may not be so subtle compared to bullying, which is often much more obvious. So it is important for managers and employees also to pay attention to the issues of harassment and bullying in the workplace, and ensure that there are enough checks and balances within the organization to have zero tolerance towards harassment and bullying at the workplace. Now, what can organizations do to promote good mental health in workplace? Now, despite the fact that I had earlier mentioned that there are challenges, particularly in view of this COVID pandemic now and changes in work culture, really creating a healthy workplace is not that complicated. In fact, 3 main factors need to be taken into consideration by employers and managers. Number 1, protecting good mental health by reducing work-related risk factors, and therefore it's important to identify work-related risks in a particular work environment, and it will be different in different work environments. Number two, a promotion of mental health by developing the positive aspects of work and harnessing the strengths of employees. That's very important to identify and harness the strength of individual employees. And number three, addressing pre-existing mental health issues, because although this is not widely known, or rather potential employees are unlikely to reveal this, the fact remains that many employees with pre-existing mental health issues like depression and anxiety, and they can certainly perform as well as other employees in the particular organization or workplace, but because of a certain stressful situation, may see their pre-existing mental health issues decompensate a bit further, a little bit more. And therefore, it is important for them to get adequate support from the employers and managers. Now, we also know that risks may also be related to job content. Such as unsuitable tasks for the person's competencies, or even or particular employee being subjected to unrelenting workload. These are two very commonly identified risks that can affect the mental health in a workplace. The organizations can mitigate this by encouraging staff participations in decision making, together with the employers or the managers, and to embrace perhaps flexible working hours, and to ensure there is improved communication between management and staff. These are some points some pointers that can actually go a very long way in promoting a mentally healthy workplace. And as I had mentioned earlier, there must be zero tolerance to harassment and bullying, which can also help employees feel safe in the work environment. Now, the next issue that I'd like to discuss here is the issue of burnout. Now, burnout is again another topic that has drawn great attention worldwide, but unfortunately, we don't understand too much of it, and therefore, I'm going to take a little bit extra time here to perhaps elaborate on the issue of burnout a little bit more compared to the other points in my agenda here. Now, what is burnout? Burnout is characterized by emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and ineffectiveness in the workplace. Burnout is a response to chronic and stressful workplace conditions. And burnout is more likely when employees expect too much of themselves, feel unappreciated for their work efforts, and have unreasonable demands placed upon them, or are in roles that are not a good job fit. And some employees do not even realize that they are having a burnout or suffering from a burnout. In fact, they might think that they are just struggling to keep up during stressful times. Stress, however, is experienced as feeling anxious or having a sense of urgency to complete a certain task at hand, while burnout, on the other hand, is commonly experienced as hopeless, being apathetic, or at times even displaying sarcasm and negativity. So it's important to distinguish between what is stress, what is commonly known as stress, and what can transform into burnout. So while burnout is not considered a mental illness as such, but it is definitely a major mental health issue, particularly in the workplace. And burnout, as I mentioned earlier, is having a growing impact on workplaces worldwide. And what more during these times of economic downturn? Ironically, during COVID, one would expect less work to be performed. That's a common perception, but it has already been seen in several reports that people are showing or manifesting symptoms of burnout even in this economic downturn when they are working from their homes, because employers or managers seem to think that people who work from homes are not particularly busy, and therefore add on to the workload of employees. And there have been reports coming from various parts of the world that employees working from home are also experiencing burnout. So this is something that employers and managers might need to look into. So what are some of the signs and symptoms to show us that an employee may be experiencing a burnout? Obviously, there's going to be reduced efficiency and energy. And the employee may also report of lowered levels of motivation. The managers and employers may notice increased errors and mistakes in the work of employees. The particular employee may complain of feeling tired and exhausted the whole day, and for no particular reason, and might complain of frequent headaches, and certainly will display some form of irritability in the workplace, for example, and also expressed increased frustration. In a case of burnout, also when an employee has burnout, he or she might display or demonstrate some or express some suspiciousness of colleagues, and usually these are unfounded suspiciousness of colleagues. So these are some of the features of burnout. But in severe cases of burnout, unfortunately, it can actually result in a very debilitating situation, and where people who are suffering from burnout in workplaces might resort to self-medication, like having an unhealthy intake of alcohol or other substances, illicit drugs or tobacco. And this is to help them cope with the burnout. And this can be noticed in the workplace when we notice one of our colleagues who ordinarily wouldn't smoke too much cigarettes, perhaps would just suddenly increase in the intake of tobacco, or come to work smelling of alcohol, for example. There's also a lot of sarcasm and negativity in the outlook of that particular employee, and there's always this self-doubt in that in the employee who's suffering from burnout. Okay, if the issue of burnout is left not addressed or left unaddressed in the workplace, there could be several outcomes. And several debilitating outcomes, including developing a full-fledged clinical depression. And needless to say that the physical health of the employee can also be affected by this. And it has been shown that employees having or suffering from burnout also are prone to or have increased risk of accidents, motor vehicle accidents. And they also would have or display, in most cases, a sort of a communication breakdown, not only between themselves and their colleagues or their management, but also do not communicate, or there's a communication breakdown with their family members and their friends. So there is also a social impact to this. So how do companies, how does the management and managers and employers prevent or roll out some prevention strategies as far as burnout is concerned? I think it is absolutely important for the management to provide a clear, or to have a clear expectation for all new employees and as to what their job description is and what their output should be, each employee in the organization, and to make them understand their contribution to the organization's goal, because every employee, however small the employee may be, can contribute to the overall goals of the organization or the company. And these days, we find many organizations enforcing reasonable working hours because, and the fact that because of COVID as well, people are working from homes. But even otherwise, this philosophy or this culture of resorting to flexible working hours was started several years ago, and it was found to be quite useful. It's also important from the employees. And sometimes organizations should be also a bit flexible and clear to the employees as to which activities require higher standards and when it is quite all right to lower the bar a little bit and still meet business needs. So when we convey this to the employees, then they would feel more empowered and identify themselves with the overall goals and expectations. And obviously, it is also good to encourage social support and respect within the organization among different teams. Some companies might have several teams working within the company, and it is good to ensure there's proper and respectful interaction between the teams. All this will go a long way in preventing burnout. And finally, I would like to end by commenting a little bit on the mental health implications as a result of that. Now, we have to be prepared for design changes in the workplace because it is all geared towards having less physical contact with the aim to decrease the density at workplace and working from home may be an option. It has already been established as an option. However, working from home can also take a toll on one's mental health. People continue to worry, despite, whether they're working from home or coming to the workplace, they continue to worry about financial instability and the potential loss of jobs. They might hold on to a job now, but they don't know for how long they can be retained. And therefore, that is also a worry and can have mental health implications. Now, employee safety at the workplace will also be a consideration. An employee who is working from home might not have this consideration, but for example, if somebody who chooses to come to the workplace might be preoccupied with the thought of contracting the virus at the workplace. So this is also, with so much of uncertainty around this virus and the transmission, and without any clear solution to this pandemic that we can expect in the very near future, this is going to have a psychological decompensation leading to anxiety and depression in the workplace. And we already have seen some frontline workers displaying symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, medical frontline workers particularly, as a result of experiencing very traumatic events during the COVID. So I think now in this post-COVID adjustments in the workplace, employers need to look to ways and means to support employees beyond the traditional workplace. And obviously this is going to involve a lot of interaction between the employees and managers, and to come into some form of consensus as to what would constitute a support by the employers in this new norm. And lastly, my advice to managers and employees also is that they should not forget to look after their own mental health before they can then reach out to or effectively provide support to employees in order to create a mentally healthy workplace. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Andrew, all the way from Nauru, like 7,200 kilometers away from Kuala Lumpur. It shows that Star Media Group will never stop to feed you with knowledge. Even we have distance like 1,000 miles away, we always find a way to connect you guys with the knowledge. Also, with the right e-learning partners we have here, everything is possible. So thank you again, Dr. Andrew, all the way from Nauru. Okay, so
power of technology. Thank you.
Okay, we actually have Dr. Andrew now with me. Yeah, again, technology, right? So we can always talk with even thousands of kilometers away. So we have question for you, doctor, from Dr. Sharifah. So Malaysian Mental Health Association used to conduct face-to-face mental health first aid training for the organization. Given the current pandemic, is there any new approach or training options for this training? So what do you think, Dr. Andrew?
Okay, so thank you for that question. It's very relevant that we consider alternate methods of providing this training in this current scenario. However, for now, we are still sticking on to our more traditional face-to-face kind of way of conducting this training. But given the fact that we are very much conscious of this COVID pandemic, we are going to take all necessary precautions reducing the transmission of the virus. So unfortunately, sorry, Dr. Sharifah, we are not in a position to offer it in the online manner for now.
All right, thank you, Dr. Andrew, for the answer just now. So maybe not for now, maybe later in the future, maybe we will have the right mechanism for it.
Yes.
So next question from Tsung. Has the Malaysian Mental Health Association produced any guidelines or procedures for organizations to help them build a concrete plan avoiding burnout? So over to you.
Well, we do offer with regards to burnout, and we are very much prepared to guide organizations and companies with regards to this. And we can offer tips, we can even offer the structured program for that. But we have not come out with a sort of a publication or a strict guidelines in this respect, simply because different organizations have different needs. For example, and it is usually more appropriate if we get to know the organization better, have a chat with the managers and employees, and only then we will be able to advise accordingly. So we do not believe in having one template to fit all organizations. So that's why it has to be a bit more tailor-made to your particular organization. But we'll be very happy to talk to you with regards to the issue of burnout is really gaining a lot of attention worldwide, and employees who suffer from burnout do not even realize that they're suffering from it. So we hope to engage many organizations, including yours, in this respect.
All right. So yeah, as mentioned, there shouldn't be any like specific or very rigid guidelines for everyone. It should be tailor-made to specific companies.
Absolutely.
So we have more questions. Yeah, we have more questions from the audience. Next one is from Kasang. So he said he agreed with the point of reducing the work-related risk factors. However, it is very often staff was at great stress and pressure in managing the operational risks and remedy actions. So what is your opinion and advice on this?
June, I think if you don't mind, could you just repeat that question? I missed out on some parts of the question.
Sure. The question is, it is very often staff was at great stress and pressure in managing the operational risks and remedy actions. So what are your opinion on it or advice on this? Yeah.
For the staff, you mean, or for the management?
Yeah. For the staff.
Yeah. I mean, of course, a little bit of stress, as I mentioned in my presentation just now, is enjoyed that little bit of stress because it made us feel, improved our performance and things like that. So that stress is quite common. And that must be accepted in any work environment, particularly in sort of a high-profile, high-pressured work environment. However, we know that overwhelming stress can lead to conditions, mental health conditions like anxiety and depression, and it can sometimes at some occasions even have fatal outcomes for this. So I think generally for a company, for managers, it is important to communicate, have very good communications with the employees, and come up jointly with what are the terms of reference of a particular task at hand, what are the deadlines at hand, and work around this, and try to offer as much support as possible to employees with regards to this. And as I also mentioned in my presentation just now, that it's not always necessary to expect, what should I say, top class results or outputs from employees on all occasions. There could be certain moments when the guard can be let down a little bit in order to have to outshine others on all occasions. And of course, this is going to be a little bit more difficult at this particular moment of this, where there are a lot of changes. It's the workplace in this moment of COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of staff are now beginning to work from home. Now that poses a lot of challenge for staff as well as for the employers. There's also recently we have had reports where people are saying that managers are giving staff too much of work, to staff who are working from home. There's a perception that people who work from home, can do much more work, and things are not, modulated well to ensure that staff are not overwhelmed with work. So that can cause a lot of stress to staff as well. And I think right now a lot of people are also, despite having jobs, are probably concerned that of whether they can hold on to their jobs for a long period of time. That is causing a lot of stress. And although our talk today is very much related to the workplace, and mental health issues concerning workplace, simply because as work in the workplace, we must not forget that there are also other causes of stress in a working adult, and not necessarily has to do with the workplace. So there are other stresses, and particularly in this pandemic situation, where people working from homes could also have stress from the home front. For example, being distracted by their family or children while working from home. So that is going to cause additional stress as well. It's going to also have an impact on how, the interpersonal relationship with their family members and their friends and things like that. So it's not an easy thing, but thank you for bringing. Ultimately, I believe that very good or transparent communications between management and the staff will solve a lot of problems. And if there is a meeting point where the staff and management understand the philosophy of the organization and the goals of the organization, things can lead to a mentally healthy workplace environment.
All right. I think the main key takeaway just now is to always work together between the employers and employees to make this change, to reduce burnout, or even like to eliminate the whole thing. Let's make our working place as a happy place for everyone. All right. We have another question. From Ravin. So I know someone who was bullied and harassed at work. When he complained, he was then dismissed. So are there any procedure to protect employees facing this issue? So this is a very interesting question. So what do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, I think, to be honest now, this issue of bullying and harassment has got a lot of attention all over the world, including Malaysia. Companies must now come up with policies that are, very clear policies that tell employees, tell everyone in the company that they have zero tolerance towards bullying and harassment. Now, as Ravin just now said, quoted and got dismissed for reporting the matter. Unfortunately, this is the reality of the situation, simply because it is very difficult to prove bullying, as opposed to harassment. Now, harassment, I mean, there's a lot of overlap between harassment, sexual harassment, and bullying and things like that. Whereas harassment is usually not related to the workload. Bullying is usually related to the workload, and it can be very subtle. Somebody can, your manager can bombard short deadlines, knowing that you can't cope with it, or not giving you the adequate resources. You might have the skills, but not providing you with adequate resources for that. So that is bullying, and it's very difficult for you to prove that you are being bullied in a company, as opposed to harassment, where even one incident of harassment, with sexual harassment or otherwise, even one such incident can lead to severe action against the person who committed the act. But in bullying, it is very difficult to prove that your employer is actually bullying you, or even your colleagues are bullying you. And the only way bring this issue up to your management and make it clear as to what is expected of you in terms of your output, and to ensure that there is clear transparency between, in communications between the management and yourself. Of course, it makes it all the more difficult if the person who is bullying you is your supervisor or is your line manager. And that becomes a little bit difficult, but in most organizations these days, they have already incorporated a system, a pathway in which an employee can sort of override the supervisor and approach somebody of a higher authority. That should be discussed with the employee, even as a pre-employment procedure, actually. And that's what most companies are doing these days.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat the last part of your answer?
Yeah, well, what I would suggest is, even as a pre-employment procedures, companies, management actually go through this pathway of reporting bullying, with the potential prospective employees. And this pathway must include having the employees having an ability to report the matter to someone who is even higher than the employee's line manager, because often the bully could be the line manager or the supervisor. This has to be enshrined in the company for that these days.
All right, thank you.
It's a very good point there. Actually, maybe some of the corporation, they already have their own like guidelines or anything. So if you are experiencing like what Ravin is experiencing, please go transparent, meet your management and tell them the truth. Okay, I think we have another one question from Wong. So from employer's point of view, how can we handle employees whom are burnt out, loss of confidence, always make mistakes, and can't focus at work, even given the simplest tasks? There is no deadline to get out of the burnout, and things need to move on for the company. Thank you, Dr. Andrew. So yeah, there's a question from Wong. What do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, that's very difficult, but the good thing is you have also pointed out rightly that what are the symptoms of burnout here. And in many cases, we must understand that burnout is usually seen in people who are overachievers. By definition, people who generally do well are able to cope in an ideal situation that is very appreciative of what they do. From an employer's perspective, of course, there is a tendency also. As managers, we would like to, think that people who are overachievers are able to outperform others, and therefore we continue to depend on them as a person who can solve problems or who is able to deal with a particular assignment or a task that others might not be able to deal with. And so we forget many times that people have their limits, and it is difficult, and people who are high achievers by nature would probably say yes to everything and say that they can handle a particular situation until one day they break down. And for that to be, to prevent such a thing from happening again, there must be absolute transparency or respectful communications between the management and the staff to say what is the output that can be desired at what deadline. If the task is too big, then you break down the task into small mini accomplishments, so to speak, and give deadlines for each of that particular task within a task. And then the employee who is able to achieve those tasks will probably then feel that it is more realistic for him or her to complete the bigger task at hand. And of course, in this particular COVID scenario, again, things like this are going to be difficult. How is a manager going to monitor work performance of an employee? It can be challenge. And the employee, on the other hand, also might feel overwhelmed by the tasks given by the employer or the manager, and in order to please the manager or to ensure that the task is completed at a particular time, might then forego looking after his or her own health, and this can then have a sort of a snowball kind of an effect where that burnout can lead to full-fledged depression. And of course, it's going to affect the productivity of the employee. But often in cases of burnout, as you have rightly pointed out just now, that you're going to see one of the first things that you will see is some sort of impairment or some sort of poor indicator of poor. You might also find some other kind of features where the employee is trying to cope with the symptoms of burnout by maybe consuming more alcohol or smoking or even doing some kind of illicit drugs, might have difficulty in sleeping, complaining of aches and pains. And in burnout particularly, you will find a kind of cynicism in the employee who is very dismissive of the whole philosophy of the company, and have a very pessimistic outlook in life. These are symptoms of burnout generally, and it can be a big challenge to employers and managers, but it can be done. And if there are any difficulties in this regard,
Hello? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Doctor, for the
great Q&A session just now. I think everyone was very satisfied with your answers. And then we have reached our end of the session. So, Doctor, if you have any a conclusion or any words to the people here.
We have just now, we in this question and answer session, we dealt a lot with the difficulties that the managers might have, and also difficulties of employees. Often focus on the mental health of employees. And I think my message here would be also that managers themselves look after their own mental health. Often they don't do that. They try to, solve problems in the workplace without focusing or paying attention to their own mental health. So all those managers who are listening in today or watching this, I would advise them to be focus on their own mental health and to be resilient and strong before they reach out to employees. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Andrew, for joining us all the way
Now
from
7,200 kilometers away from Kuala Lumpur. Hope to see you again, and I hope everyone has learned a lot from what have you shared today and from all the Q&As and the session. Thank you so much, Doctor, and see you again anytime soon. Thank you.